Welcome to Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022. Your Day with the Podcast brought to you exclusively by Cowboy State Daily, Wyoming's news authority. Find them at cowboystatedaily.com and on their Facebook page. As we embark on the second half of the week, it's still going to be windy in many areas. A lot of wind yesterday along and east of the divide, a lot of wind again today, and really to some extent on Thursday. Even though the weather is going to be improving with more sun and temperatures moderating, those north winds will put a chill right through you. So it's still going to be cold and it's still going to be kind of chilly because of those winds. But the snow squalls, the snow showers, and even the thunderstorms a few areas saw yesterday has moved off to the east. We've got a weak system that'll come through the northern Rockies. Thursday night and Friday, there will be maybe a couple of rain or snow showers across maybe Montana, northern and eastern Wyoming, late Thursday into Friday with the front, but it's really just not going to do much. And that's going to segue into what we talked to you yesterday about, which is an awesome weekend. The weekend confidence is very, very high that we're going to have a spring-like weekend. Spring fever will be running rampant, 60s and 70s coming. And I think they're going to probably last all the way into Monday. And here we go again. With the next couple of storms coming in next week, the models are just useless, honestly, in terms of trying to help you plan ahead on whether or not we just have a couple of minor storms next week or one or two bigger ones. And we'll talk about why that is and show it to you. But the weather will change. After some great weather through Monday, it gets colder and unsettled again, as you'd expect this time of year. But we've got a lot of details to sort out again. Here's a radar shot from yesterday afternoon. I wanted to show you Cheyenne is right here. Over here is Scotts Bluff and Gering. Here's Torrington to give you point of reference. See these little lightning bolts? We had snow showers with thunder and lightning yesterday in that northerly flow that brought some of those snow squalls and snow showers into the high plains and Rockies yesterday. Now, the pattern that produced that yesterday has moved off to the east and out of here, but it's a sign of the times. March is usually the month where the Intermountain West and the far west usually does have its first thunderstorms of the spring season. So it's not unusual to have that at all, especially when you get these cold systems like this, where that sun angle at March warms things up on the ground quickly, causes instability, and then you'll get these thunderstorms. And a lot of times in March and April and even May, you'll get them with snow. Satellite photos really show that storm system that caused all the tornadoes and the severe weather down in this part of the nation over the last couple of days. Well, it's now moved into the Midwest, and look at the comma. Just a very impressive storm system. You may be wondering what's with the blue here. This is just a way to represent low clouds. The brighter clouds here are the higher clouds associated with the bigger thunderstorms, the heavier precipitation. These low clouds, the satellite is picking up. These would be stratus clouds, low-level clouds closer to the ground. That's why they're represented by a different color. And you can see some patches of blue here up over western Wyoming. And then you see the stratus clouds that are here all the time off the west coast. So that's what the blue represents. That is the east. Now look at the west. The west shows this area of high pressure building in and the sunny skies that will be bringing us the high pressure and fair weather this weekend. Here's next week's weather right here. A low here out south of the Aleutians, another one back up here in the northern Pacific. It's this area right here that the atmospheric modeling is just having a very difficult time with. And we'll show you that here in a moment. But you can see this, the contrast, really stormy in the east, fair in the west. That's typical. When you get these big storms that are going to be in the east, the western half of the United States will have fair weather. While we may not see as much severe weather today as yesterday, there's still the prospect for thunderstorms all along the eastern United States from Michigan to Florida. So it's going to be kind of soupy and messy on the other side of the U.S. again today. Now, I saw a news article yesterday that made a reference that March has been warm so far. I don't know where that came from. This is the temperature anomaly for the month of March. Since March 1, you can see the concentration here, the blue, of the coolest temperatures relative to the 30-year normals is right in an axis here through the western high plains and Rockies. And yesterday is a good example. It's not been a warm month. Now, we are going to have this big warm up this weekend, and that's going to put a dent in these temperature anomalies right here, but it won't erase them. So it has not been a warm March. And for the year to date, this may surprise you. year to date, this is what temperatures look like across the continental United States. There's a lot more blue than there is orange, especially for the folks up here that have really had a really cold winter. So the year has not started off blistering warm. It's been the opposite. Don't know quite where some of this stuff comes from at times. Let's take a look at what's going to happen going forward. First of all, here's the upper level low right over northeastern Missouri, central areas of the United States. The strong jet stream winds coming in from the north right here is what's going to keep a cool, windy pattern here along and east of the Continental Divide again today. Here's the high pressure ridge that's going to be building into the United States as we get on into the weekend and early next week. Wind, this is the wind forecast over the next 48 hours, and you can see these high winds right here, gusting in the 40 and 50 mile per hour range across eastern Colorado into northern New Mexico. Strong winds along I-80 and I-90 across the Plains states here. So very windy conditions on the backside of the storm, and you can see all the wind here on the eastern side of the U.S., much less wind west of the Continental Divide. As we get into the weekend, we're going to draw another happy face because here comes that high pressure ridge bringing in the warmth. Southwest winds aloft will bring in warmer air in from the deserts. And then look at these high temperatures. We showed you the same graphic yesterday. These are the forecasted high temperatures for Saturday across the Pacific Northwest, the far west, and into the Plain states. Notice the contrast, though. Look at the difference in temperature from just east of the Rockies into the Dakotas and Minnesota. These are high temperatures. Look how cold it is there. This is a classic setup in spring. This is why we have a lot of severe weather. This is why the tornadoes start to happen. These big contrasts in air masses that you get into spring. And it's completely normal in spring to have these huge changes in latitude between warm temperatures going all the way up to the pools and cold temperatures leaving the pools and going way south. It's just the time of year that happens. And it's also a reminder that even though we've got temperatures like this, look at these temperatures on Sunday, but look at that contrast. You've got single digits in southern Canada and lower 70s in southeastern Montana. As the crow flies, that's pretty far in distance, but at the same time in the big picture, it really isn't. So we're not there yet. This big warm up this weekend is by no means a persistent trend that's going to set up shop. And this is why we're going to start to see the Pacific throw more weather at us beginning next week. Now here is the conundrum, and we're going to go through the big differences in the models just like we did with the last storm. This is the European model. This is for Sunday afternoon. We've got a low getting basically cut off from the main jet stream flow right here. And if that happens, this low is just going to kind of meander this way and really not crash the coast. That's the European model. But look at the American model. This is just almost unusable, because if the American model is correct, we've got a big, deep storm, and we're going to see significant rains into California and southern Oregon, and it snows in the Sierra Nevadas. If this happens, there's almost no rain for California. So it's one of those either-or propositions. So that's the European. This is the GFS or the American model. The Canadian model, well, more like the GFS model. So we go back and look at the big differences. So there is a stark contrast. And what this means is that if this model is correct, this system will move through the Rockies late Monday and Tuesday, mainly as a fast-moving cold front. If this ends up being right, we're going to have a more organized Colorado low come on in. If the Canadian's right, well, it's kind of a hybrid between the two, to where the storm gets split again, much like the storm got split in the western United States with this last storm system. If we go out further, this is for Tuesday on the Canadian model. See how it gets stretched out again? That's almost a repeat of what has just happened, and then the storm becomes better organized to our east. The GFS model, again, kind of stretched out, kind of like what happened last week, and the European model keeps that low separated. But what this would mean is that this storm, if the European model is right, would be a bigger weather maker by the end of next week, right around the last day of March and the first day of April. So we've got giant question marks. Now, a lot of folks are asking, seen some comments on YouTube and in emails, which model is the best? Most of the time, the European model does perform better, but not always. Now, a lot of folks may also ask me, well, what's the difference between the models? Why are the models so schizophrenic and why are they so different? The best analogy I can give you is that each of these weather models are built differently. They're like a house. So let's use an analogy as a house. A house has doors, it has windows, it has roofs, it has walls. It's a house, but every house is built a little differently. And let's use the foundation of the house as the best example. The reason the European model most likely performs better is the foundation of the house is built better. The physics, the math, there's a ton of math and physics involved in the building of these models, but also what's important is how the models represent the terrain. The models really have to accurately represent the mountains, the valleys, the oceans, soil moisture, ice cover. There's a ton of information that goes into the models. And each of these different models have a different way of viewing their inputs. So that's the best way to describe why they come up with different solutions. But you cannot look at each model every day and say, oh, this one is always going to be right and this one's always going to be wrong. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So that's why you have to diagnose which model has a better handle on the situation. When you see disagreements like this between the models, and this is very typical in the spring and the fall as you change seasons because there's so much going on with the weather. When the sun angles change, the earth tilts, there's just a lot going on. And the more inputs and the more variables that you have into the models, then that could cause some problems. We call that feedback a lot of times. So a lot of times these models will feed back onto themselves and then they become unusable the further you go in time. That's why a long-range forecast is very, very tricky, especially this time of year. Also, another comment I hear is that why does sometimes the weather forecast on my smartphone not have what's really happening? Well, the reason for that is that the smartphones, for the most part, use only one computer model. And so they're going to sometimes pick the weather data and the weather forecast data that on any particular day is maybe not the right model to use. However, it's very expensive to create a weather app or a weather model on a smartphone that's going to be able to take into account all these differences in the modeling. And that's why the weather forecast, once you go out past 5 days, a lot of times the one I get on your phone doesn't match reality. A reminder, we're giving away some kids' books. Go to dayweather.com, email us, dar@dayweather.com. Enter by April 1st for a giveaway of the Day Weather Kids book. Have yourself a great Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow.